Well, folks, welcome back to the Rife Report. Today is election day. It is November 4th, 2025. Polls open today for the 2025 elections. Now, in these elections today, we will see different elections for gubernatorial positions, mayoral positions, and even some Supreme Court races in the state of Pennsylvania. We're really going to be able to see if Republicans can continue this momentum from 2024. We know how things work, though, in off-cycle elections. They are higher propensity voters. It is typically the opposition party that has better turnout in these elections. But we will see races in New Jersey, Virginia, New York City, where voters will face a real choice. They have a choice on the future of their taxation policies, how their politicians will approach the issue of crime, and the overreach of the federal, state, and local government into each individual person's lives. And today we are going to be looking at my final 2025 election predictions from New Jersey to Virginia to all the 2025 elections and what that could signal for the 2026 midterms. So let's dive into it. Before we do, drop down below, hit that subscribe button, make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future. Folks, let's jump into it. We're going to start off with the mayoral race in New York City. This is a race that started in an upset where incumbent Mayor Eric Adams ran as an independent recently. Earlier this month in October, he dropped out. Earlier this month, around October 4th, Adams dropped out. He was polling around 8.4% behind the Republican nominee Curtis Silva, Andrew Cuomo, the former governor, and the frontrunner and Democrat nominee Zohran Mamdani. Now, it's Zohran Mamdani versus, you can almost say Andrew Cuomo and Republican Curtis Silva at this point. Mamdani is the Democratic Socialist Alliance-backed progressive. He currently leads the polls anywhere from about 43 to 50%, depending on the individual poll that you're looking at. The most recent, though, Atlas Intel poll that was dropped just 2 days ago. They dropped another one yesterday, but the one that was dropped 2 days ago showed Mamdani with only a 5-point lead. It was the smallest lead that we've seen in any of the most recent polls for Mamdani. We know that Mamdani will push his rent control, stabilized, or I should say free busing, free grocery stores. He will push a lot of socialist, far left-wing radical ideas on the city in New York City. New York City is already a city that is billions and has a $7 billion deficit right now. The last thing New York City needs, this financial capital needs, is to be taken under by these radical socialist policies that have never worked on any scale like this and will not work this time. Now, who's the next best alternative in this race? You have Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo, obviously the former disgraced, scandal-plagued ex-governor of the state of New York. Andrew Cuomo, obviously, on the gubernatorial side, was elected way back, I believe in 2010 was when he was because Eliot Spitzer in 2006, obviously he's the disgraced former governor of the state. Cuomo won back in 2010 with roughly, he won what is that, a 30% margin in the state of New York. Obviously, we know this is a liberal stronghold. This is a state where Hillary Clinton was a senator from the last time they had a Republican as governor here was George Pataki, I think. Yeah. All the way back in 2002 was the last time he was elected. But fast forward to 2010, Andrew Cuomo becomes the governor. He served for roughly 10 years, winning re-election in 2014. He cut his margin in half by 14 percentage points. Fast forward to 2018, Cuomo wins by 23 points. Now, obviously, we know he had to resign in disgrace after many scandals came out against him. But he is really it's hard to say, but the moderate in this race. Relative to Zohran Mamdani, he's the moderate, and Curtis Silva just has no chance. Silva is the founder of the Guardian Angels, and right now he's jumping around in the polls anywhere from about 14 to the high 20s, 21% right here, and that was the Manhattan Institute poll, showed him at 21%. Now, interesting enough, the most recent Atlas Intel poll that came out showed that if Curtis Silva had dropped out of this race, Cuomo would be leading by 5 points. Something interesting to think. Is that something we're going to look back on and say, you know what, he shouldn't have been in this race? If I have to make a decision between a radical socialist and a perverted mayor or a perverted ex-disgraced governor, I'm going to take the disgraced ex-perverted governor, if I'm being honest with you. I think that's the only way you're going to save this city. That's really what it is. But we're going to have to see exactly what happens. But my prediction in this race is pretty straightforward. I believe Mamdani will win. I think he'll win anywhere from about 10, 11 points up to 17, 18 points. Now, I think he does not hit the 50% threshold. I think it's going to be close. It's not going to surprise me if he hits the 50% threshold. But, 47, 48, 49, I think somewhere in that ballpark is where Mamdani will win. And this is bad. This is very bad, not only for our country, bad for Democrats, which I guess it could give Republicans an opportunity in 2026. He is the new face of the Democrat Party. Zohran Mamdani, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Bernie Sanders, they are the face of the Democrat Party now. They are. They are the face of higher taxes, more government control, softer policies when it comes to crime, calling for the disbandment of the police force in New York City. Wait till you see the exodus to other states. Over 1 million voters right now in recent polls say that they are ready to leave. If Mamdani wins, they're gone. When Mamdani decides to rack up taxes on the millionaires and billionaires, wait till they leave. Wait till their tax base disappears. Now, like I said, the prediction, I think Mamdani will win. Will he win by a outright majority? I don't know. But I think it's going to be right in that ballpark. Will not surprise me if he does. Now, moving on to our next big election, which is the 2025 New Jersey gubernatorial election. Now, this is an open seat right now to fill this seat after term limited Democrat Governor Phil Murphy has been in power for the last 8 years. Now, if you remember, go back to 2017. Murphy is elected. Now, remember, Chris Christie was the at that time, where is he? Chris Christie had won back in 2009 by roughly about 3.6 percentage points. Fast forward to 2013, he wins by 22 points. Chris Christie wins. Obviously, a better year for Republicans. Fast forward to 2017, though, Phil Murphy wins this open seat right here by roughly 14 points. Was considered a popular governor at that time. Fast forward to 2021, and the roles have really changed. He is not as popular as he once was. Phil Murphy only wins his re-election bid by 3.2 percentage points in this election, which is really, really bad. Really bad. And the most recent Atlas Intel poll that we have right here shows that they're within 1 point. Jack Ciattarelli, who ran against Phil Murphy back in 2021, who is now running against Democrat Representative Mikie Sherrill, is within a point, according to the most recent Atlas Intel poll right here. Now, some interesting information here that you can look at is really the fact that Phil Murphy is unpopular in the state. He's underwater by 9 points in this state. Donald Trump is only underwater by 5 points. Now, Mikie Sherrill is even in this race, and Jack Ciattarelli is only under by 4 percentage points in this election. But this has really come down to an election of trying to paint the current administration. Mikie Sherrill is trying to tie the Republican nominee to President Donald Trump and his policies, and vice versa. Jack Ciattarelli is trying to tie Mikie Sherrill and her policies as a continuation of the clearly unpopular incumbent governor, Phil Murphy. Now, if you look in the polls, generally speaking, now, obviously, this Atlas Intel poll, she was within 1 point. 1 point you're looking at here where Mikie Sherrill is only up not even a percentage point. This is 0.9 percentage points she is up by. But the average that we're looking at here is roughly about 3% that Mikie Sherrill is up over Jack Ciattarelli going into this election. But like we said, there's a big mix between all of them right here. It's a big mix. She's, up by a point, maybe 2 points. Remember, go back even just to late August when Mikie Sherrill almost had a double-digit lead. She was looking around 9, 10 percentage points at that time. That is almost all evaporated. We're now looking at roughly a 3%, average polling. That's how much. That's the RCP average from where she's at. She is leading Ciattarelli by roughly 3 percentage points. Now go back. Let's go back to 21. At this point, Phil Murphy, he was up 7.8 percentage points at this time. He was up almost 8 percentage points. So if there's even a margin, and look, they only voted for Murphy. It's not 2.8. I don't know why they have 2.8 in there. It was really 3.2. It was the percentage that Phil Murphy won over Ciattarelli. But even if there was a miss, like there was in 2021, I mean, my goodness, You could see a Republican win in New Jersey. Now, granted, yes, are both legislative branches controlled by the Democrats in New Jersey? Yes, they are. That will make it very difficult for him, but he will still have executive control. But we're going to have to see exactly what is happening in this election. Ultimately, right now, my prediction for the state of New Jersey is that it is a lean Democrat seat. I think Democrats will win by less than 5 points. I think anywhere from the area where I'm at is anywhere from about a 1.5 point victory for Jack Ciattarelli to about a 3.5, 4 point victory for Mikie Sherrill. That's kind of where I'm at, which, in my mind gives him a, 15, 20% chance of winning, but I really don't think it's something that's far out there. Look, Ciattarelli is leading with men right now. He's winning on people who are very, very focused on the economy right now, focused on affordability. And even now, I don't know if I 100% believe this, which may make this poll a little misleading. Look, with black Americans in New Jersey, Jack Ciattarelli was leading with 60% of their support. And with multiracial voters, he was winning with almost 70% of their votes. So I don't know. That's a very, that's a difficult place to be. Do I think he's going to win outright with the African Americans? I don't. But how does that affect the top of the line margins at the end of the day? But you can see right here, he's winning with independents. But also, there's some data in here that, either Atlas Intel is going all in on this, or it's really going to blow up their A+ rating that they've really been able to secure over the last number of elections. Look, go all the way down. They leave this chart down here, how close they were. They were the most accurate pollster in the 2024 election, not only on the national vote, but also when it came down to state-by-state elections. Look at this. National, they were within 0.3 percentage points. Their final poll was from where the national average or the final result ended up. But the fact is things are getting tight here. Costs are really hurting consumers in the state. We see that they have some of the highest property taxes of any state. The average house has almost a $9,000 property tax bill on a yearly basis, which is just, in my mind, ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous going in the state of New Jersey. But like I said, my prediction is that Sherrill sneaks by again. Look, I think the differences in the environment, the turnout in 21, the type of electorate that turned out in 21 is different than the electorate that's going to turn out in 25. We had an unpopular Democrat administration. Then we now have what some would describe as an unpopular Republican administration. Even though in this most recent poll right here, you could see that President Trump actually was not doing too bad when it came to his approval rating. He had a 47% approval rating, which is a little higher than where most of his approval ratings are right now. If you're looking at the average, he's only underwater by 5 points here. So that's actually not a bad poll for him. But like I said, I think this is going to come down to, I think Ciattarelli can win. I think it's going to come down to he needs to tie together the coalition that Ciattarelli got to vote for him in 21. The big advancement that President Trump was able to make since 2020. Look, go back to 2020. New Jersey voted for Biden by 16 points. 24, it voted for Harris by only 6 points. That's a 10-point gap, a 10-point margin that just disappeared there. And look, President Trump has given Jack Ciattarelli in his campaign about $1 million to targeting specific voters, low propensity voters that will vote for President Trump, that they need to drive out to vote for Jack Ciattarelli in this election. But that's where my final prediction is as of right now. And that moves us on to the next big election, which is the 2025 California Proposition 50. This is voters' push, well, I guess you could say legislators in the state of California and voters' push to scrap an independent redistricting commission that was established years and decades ago for Democrats to draw maps that are going to target roughly 5 to 9 of the congressional seats in California. Now, right now, Republicans hold 9 out of the 52 seats in the state of California. Democrats believe that they can, if they can redistrict mid-decade, which based on the polling, it appears like they're going to. Right now, out of the polls that we have, the average shows that about 57 to 60% say yes. The confidence interval right here is like you're anywhere from about 52, 53%, all the way up to about 61, 62% up here. So, by all polling, the stretch of all polling measures that we have right now, this will pass in the state of California. Now, they believe that they can redraw, especially you go down here. They believe that they can disrupt a lot of these different Republican districts throughout the state of California, especially California district here. This is a very, very vulnerable one with Kevin Kiley. They believe that they can rewrite this, they can redraw this district, and basically eliminate it. They believe they can eliminate up to 5. I have even seen maps at a certain point that shows, and actually I'm going to pull that up for you real quick. Here it is. This was a map that shows an extreme redistricting scenario where Democrats are able to redistrict the entire state, and they're able to eliminate all Republican districts going into 2026, which is going to be really interesting. Now, this bill has been touted and named as the, quote, Election Rigging Response Act to counter President Trump, and Republicans in different states like Texas, like Florida, like Missouri, which have redistricted mid-decade and have eliminated Democrat districts throughout the country. Now, we could see this get even worse if we see that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, if we see that struck down in the Supreme Court, we could see all hell break loose, which I am personally in favor of the VA2 being struck down. I believe that anti-racist policies are racist in themselves. The fact that we need to specifically look out for one race when we are redistricting, I think is absolutely ridiculous that they deserve a majority in a district in some of these states. No. There is nothing wrong. You can go in a primary and vote for who you want to. We live in a republic. We are a democracy, but we're a republic. We're not a direct republic. We're a representative. We elect representatives to go and vote on our behalves in Congress. And the reality is I think these anti-racist policies are racist in themselves. I think, if you want to be anti-racist in your personal life, you want to call out racism where you see it, go ahead, be my guest. But you cannot legislate. We cannot legislate from a place that there's inherent racism and inherent bias. African Americans and Asians, they can go vote for whoever they want to. They can go vote for whoever they want to. So that could make this even worse. That could polarize this even worse than it already is right now. But my prediction as of right now in the state of California, although I don't have an election map I can click on right here, I believe that this will pass overwhelmingly by more than 15 points. I believe that Democrats will probably get close to 60. My bands are anywhere from about 58% support to 62% support going into 2020, into this election. And you can see Republicans have basically given up on going against Prop 55. This was between Republican leaders in the state like Kevin McCarthy, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Charles Munger Jr., who is Charlie Munger's son, I believe. He was obviously one of the owners of Berkshire Hathaway along with Warren Buffett. But they were spending millions and millions of dollars on this. And let's go down here. He contributed $32 million this year to defend this system. His committee, Protect Voters First, was created soon after Newsom moved to put Prop 50 on the ballot. Now you come all the way down here, you can see that in the by the very end of it, when McCarthy's led Stop Sacramento Power Grab just raised $11 million when they promised that they would raise roughly $50 million. Look, they have gone from a weekly television advertising budget of roughly $4 to $5 million to less than $300 roughly 2 to 3 weeks before the election. So you can see they're obviously pulling back. They don't believe this is a fight that they can win at this point. And I agree. I think that is a smart decision. This is not a fight you're going to win here. But the reality is if you're looking at the state level here, or a state-by-state level, Republicans have many more opportunities to redistrict mid-decade and ultimately make this a much more competitive map for Republicans than Democrats. Democrats do not have the opportunities that Republicans have to redistrict mid-decade. So that is my prediction, roughly 58 to 62% support for Prop 50. But I'm you can't really say, it's going to pass by this much or this much. No, it's just going to pass. It's going to pass, and I won't be surprised if it's by a big margin. But that will take us to our next election here, which is the 2025 Virginia gubernatorial election and the attorney generals. We are going to talk about the attorney general election here. Now, this is a open gubernatorial position. Remember, back in 2021, Glenn Youngkin beat Terry McAuliffe, who was the former Democrat governor of the state. Remember, governors in the state can only serve for one consecutive term. So before Youngkin, you had Ralph Northam, and then before him, Terry was the governor before that, was running again at the first time he was eligible to do that. Youngkin squeaked out a pretty close victory here. Now, a lot of people say they didn't see it coming, and the polling data did not see it coming from a long ways away. But go back to 2021. At this point, Youngkin had pulled ahead. Things had tightened. This was in late August. This was a 5-point race. By the end of October, this is a 1-point race, and then Youngkin took the lead at the very end, won by roughly a little under 2 percentage points in this election here. Now, backtrack to where we are right now. We have a election where you'll see term limited GOP governor Glenn Youngkin cannot run for re-election. You have the former Democrat representative from Virginia, Abigail Spanberger. She's a former CIA agent, running against incumbent Lieutenant Governor right now, Winsome Earl Sears, the Republican. Now, Spanberger in this election, we have to admit it, she leads big. She leads big. Emerson College poll has her up 11 points. A Roanoke College poll has her up 10 points. We're seeing anywhere from about 10 to 12 points. She's currently up right now. Even some polls showing her up 12 points, 15 points from YouGov just a couple weeks ago that we saw right here. But going into the final stretch, we're seeing Spanberger roughly up about 10 percentage points, and she is not, and it's not. Her lead is not dissipated, not like we saw in 2021 with Glenn Youngkin, not like we saw in New Jersey with Jack Ciattarelli in 2021. Abigail Spanberger's, her lead is actually increasing, and it's increasing exponentially. Just in the last couple of days, she has gone from being up about 7 points to being up over 10 percentage points. We are in the double-digit category as of right now. Now, the facts of the matter are in this election is that the economy is the top issue. Spanberger is clearly edging out Winsome Earl Sears on these issues roughly by about 10 points, plus abortion, plus immigration. Those are really splitting down the middle. But I think a big one is, look, the layoffs. Donald Trump is trying to cut the size, certain places cut the size of the federal government where he can. A lot of people who work in the federal government live in Virginia, and I think that is hitting them hard here. I really do. Now, I do think that Democrats and the mainstream media, they're very complicit in this, because if Winsome Earl Sears was a Democrat, she would be the first black woman nominee. She is strong on borders, and she supports slashing our federal budget, which obviously voters in the state aren't very thrilled about. But at the end of the day, if you had a African-American woman who was nominated in the state of Virginia, she would be, if she was a Democrat, she would be a presidential contender in 2028. That's the reality of the Democrat Party. But in the Republican Party, we work on meritocracy. And the reality is I don't think Earl Sears has been able to recreate the winning message that we saw back in 2021 with Glenn Youngkin. But also, it was a product of the time. Look, go back to 2020, 2021. Where were we? Schools are getting shut down. Mask mandates are being implemented. We're talking about a nationwide vaccine mandate being pushed through by OSHA, through the Biden administration. We are seeing massive parental issues at play here in 2020. Those aren't top issues in play right now. And so that was the winning message back in 2021. Obviously, it has not been a winning message now, and Earl Sears has really not been able to find her footing at this point. I think that at the end of the day, I think this is a likely Democrat seat. I think Spanberger wins from anywhere from about 5 to 11, 12 points in here. But I think there's a lot of implications based on how well Winsome Earl Sears does, because you have another election that's going on, which is the 2025 Virginia Attorney General election, where you have incumbent Attorney General Jason Miyares versus Jay Jones. Now, Jay Jones, obviously, we know the horrendous text messages that have come out from him, where he had talked about the things he would do to his opponent's children, that he wanted to do certain things. And I don't want to say it on here because I don't want YouTube to censor me on this, but you go look it up yourself. Go look up Jay Jones scandal, texting scandal, the things that he said he wanted to do to his opponent's children. You just go listen to what he had to say. You go listen to that. You can see clearly kind of where that broke. Jay Jones was leading in most polls. You can see where that scandal broke out, where then Jason Miyares was leading in almost every single poll. Now things have really tightened up again, where you're basically at an even. Like this is a 47-47 race right now, in my opinion. That's where we're at. You know, we know those 2022 texts where he was mocking a dead GOP lawmaker's family. And there's been bipartisan backlash, but Spanberger continues at this point to support him and has continued to endorse him in here. But I think that Spanberger in this election will probably, like I said, will win by about 50, should probably win 53, 54% of the vote, win some Earl Sears, 47, 46, 45% of the vote, maybe even 44. I think Dems are going to flip this. But look, it's also just a product of the election, the electorate that's going to turn out here. But depending on the margin at the gubernatorial level, I think we'll have a lot of play in the attorney general election. I think if Winsome Earl Sears can hold it within 5-6 points, I think Jason Miyares has a chance to still win. If we're looking more at 8, 9, 10, 11 points, Spanberger's winning by, I think by the fact that a lot of Democrats may not know about this, they just go vote, they just vote Democrat down ballot. I think that's where, I think that's where we're at right now. But I think in my final prediction for the Virginia Attorney General election, I think Miyares holds on by about 0.5 point, maybe a point. But I think it's so connected to how people vote in the gubernatorial election. But I think ultimately Miyares will hold on by about 0.5 point. But I'm really not going to be surprised if Jones is able to, or if Jay Jones wins by a point, maybe 1.5 points, 2 points in this election. I think he's definitely going to run behind the top of the ticket in this election. But now that brings us to any other elections that we have. There's a lot of other elections that we can look at going into election day today. Look in Minneapolis where you have incumbent mayor, and I'm just going to scroll down to it real quick. Let's find Minnesota right here, which is really going to be the most watched race in Minnesota, is for the mayor of Minneapolis. Now, another big one, though, to look at is the mayor of St. Paul, the Twin Cities. You have Minneapolis and you have St. Paul. Look at the Twin Cities, where a former state senator, state representative, who literally has come out and stated that she is an illegal immigrant, is on track to become the next mayor of St. Paul, which is just asinine, but that's where we're at right now. But in Minneapolis, you have incumbent Mayor Jacob Frey running against progressive state senator Omar Fatih. Obviously there was a lot of this made a lot of big waves earlier this year when the DFL in Minnesota, the Democrat Farmer Labor Party, endorsed Omar Fatih. Instead of the incumbent mayor, Jacob Frey, they endorsed Omar Fatih. But then because they said that there was, election rigging and manipulation and there was, things that had gone on, they revoked it and gave it back to Jacob Frey. And Omar Fatih right now is running in this election, hoping to really, really take a hard left turn in this election. That's what they're looking to do. Now, Mayor Frey leads in early polls. But we're going to have to see what happens. I think at the end of the day, Frey will get reelected by probably 10 to 15 points in ranked choice voting. I think voters are going to reject the far left candidate in Omar Fatih, Senator Fatih, Fateh, or however you say his name. You look at what happened in 2020 in Minneapolis. I don't think we want someone in charge like that. If something were to ever happen in Minneapolis, he's the last person you want in charge of your city when that happens. Now, some other places that there are some big elections going on right now is Pennsylvania, where we will see a couple of judicial elections take place. Now, these are called retention elections for 3 Democrat justices on the Supreme Court. Democrats currently hold a 5-2 majority in Pennsylvania, and usually for a retention vote, they simply just ask the voters if they want to retain the justice for another 10-year term or not. And this is, the biggest race in Pennsylvania by far right now from both parties. And if voters choose not to retain all 3 justices, the court will then be split 2-2, and then there'll be a process to fill the vacant seats. Democrat Governor Josh Shapiro would be charged with appointing a temporary replacement, but they would have to then be confirmed by the Republican-led Senate in this election. Now, in Maine, there's a couple ballot initiatives. There's two. Question 1 calls for changes to a number of election laws. This would add a voter ID requirement, but would also shorten the period for absentee voting, allowing only one drop box per municipality, and end programs that allows disabled and elderly voters to have ballots automatically mailed to them each election. They would have to go ahead and request a ballot each time. Surveys show that Maine voters are split almost evenly. And then question 2 is a red flag law question that would establish a process where law enforcement and family members could ask a court to temporarily take away dangerous weapons from someone. They found about similar support split on this question, but much more undecided than on question 1. Lots of different things. You have the 13th Congressional District in Texas. Obviously, we know earlier this year, the representative who held that seat passed away. Sylvester Turner unexpectedly died. This is a solid blue seat. Back in 2024, it voted for, let's see, where are we? This is 30 up here. I'm guessing we're down. See, this is the issue. Some of these are just all over the board, but it was a solid Democrat seat going into 2024. We expect that this will stay a solid seat in this election here. But at this point, these are really the big elections that we're looking at right here. But there's a big piece that I want to talk about and why 2025 will not necessarily be indicative of what will happen in 2026. Look, the reality of an off-election cycle like this, a 2025 off-year election, is low turnout. We're expected to have under 40% turnout across the country. There's a lot of local focus, not on the midterm fire. And gubernatorial winners, often from the opposition or who oppose the president's party, are expected to win. But you could see Republicans in places still running on Trump's coattails, but we do expect that will fade for the most part going into 2025, these elections. Now, look, we're looking at New Jersey and Virginia. They're blue. These are blue states. Let's remember that. Let's get one thing straight. New Jersey has been a Democrat, a double-digit Democrat state for decades at this point. Let's not confuse ourselves there. Yes, have Republicans made a lot of ground, but the base is still primarily Democrats in this state. And the same thing in Virginia. This is a state that voted for Biden by 10 points, voted Kamala by 6 points. Yes, has it gotten a little more red from where it was, 4 or even 8 years ago? But the reality is that this is still a Democrat state. This is still a state that as recently as 2024 reelected Tim Kaine by almost 10 percentage points. It's like Tim Kaine ran ahead of the top of the ticket in 2024. So, I'm not going to take away, have giant takeaways from this. We're not. And in New York City, this is the most liberal city in America. These are not swing voters that you're targeting here. This is not, suburban voters that are flipping because of inflation or cost. And California is one of the most liberal states in America. Gerrymander, the backlash has really brewed because Texas Republicans and other Republicans across the country have pushed mid-decade redistricting maps to really eliminate Democrat control, to make sure Republicans hold on to power in the 2026 midterms. And so it's look, the bottom line is Democrats are going to hold in blue strongholds. And, there isn't really a good test here of a good election. There just isn't. There simply isn't. I think even if Republicans have a good night, I don't think it's indicative of what's going to happen in 26. Even if Jack Ciattarelli wins tonight, I don't think that's going to be indicative of what's going to happen in 2026. I simply don't. I think we Republicans and Democrats are going to use 2025, especially Republicans, to test different messaging, to test get out the vote strategies. I think they're testing a lot of stuff. This is their sandbox. This is where they're messing around with stuff. But ultimately, I'm not going to sit here and say that, if Democrats have a great night in Virginia, that it means Republicans are screwed going forward in the midterms. Remember, right now, the generic congressional ballot only has Democrats up by 3 points. Go back to, let's go 2018, last time Democrats were in this position. Today is the 4th, November 4th. Right now, Democrats had a 9-point advantage over the Republicans in the generic congressional ballot back in 2018. Right now, it's a third of that. They have a 3.5% advantage over the Republicans. So I'm not going to, try and draw these elaborate conclusions from a few elections that are, primarily going to be focused on local issues. But overall, I think we could see mixed results. I wouldn't be surprised if Democrats take New Jersey. I wouldn't be surprised if Republicans took it. I think Virginia, the governor, I think that's going to split. I think Spanberger wins. Miyares holds on in the AG barely. New York City, obviously, we're going to have a lefty mayor in communist Zohran Mamdani. And California is going to vote yes. That's how it's going to look. I think there are some GOP bright spots that we can look at. Look at Miyares hold. That's a big one. I hate to say it, but Jacob Frey winning in Minneapolis would be a good sign for Republicans, or maybe not even a good sign for Republicans, but a bad sign for the lunatic leftists in the party. The big picture, Trump's agenda, and this is an early test in a low turnout election, a weird electorate that's turning out, and high propensity voters, which are typically right now going to favor the Democrat Party. Voters, obviously want results on cost and crime and not experiments. And look, in the long run, I still think Republicans, people who are center-right, are going to win long-term. These are races that expose Democrat overreach. I think we can really use the New York City mayoral race to help in 2026. Look at the 2026 midterms. Do I think that the House flips back to Democrats? I don't know. The odds are pretty split right now, about 40-60 that Republicans hold it, 40% chance the Republicans hold it. So we'll see what happens. But folks, that is going to wrap things up for today. We're going to have one more video coming out on the state of Virginia today, but tune in for today and tomorrow for live results. And once again, folks, we appreciate you tuning in. Thank you so much. As always, drop down below, hit that subscribe button, and make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future. And folks, we will catch you next time.